My name is Elsa Yvanez. I live in Denmark, in Copenhagen. I am currently a postdoc researcher at CTR, the Center for Textile Research at the University of Copenhagen. And my specialty is textiles from ancient Sudan, archaeology, production, and uses. A short CV, if you will. I first graduated in Egyptology, first in France and then in England. And that's the moment when I started working in Sudan in the field a little bit, but also on Sudanese material in museum. And during my second master, when I was in London, I started specializing in ancient textiles. Then the year after, I did a research fellowship in the Sudan National Museum in the French archaeological section there, and I started my PhD. And so my PhD was entitled From Fiber to Cloth, Archaeology of Textile Production and Use in Meroitic Sudan and Nubia. And the period that I'm specializing in is late antiquity, corresponding to the Meroitic Kingdom, which is dated to about 350 BC to 350 CE. And after my PhD, I sort of continued that work, going a little bit deeper into the same or similar issues. And I did a Marie Curie fellowship at CTR. And the project was called Textiles. And I continued to work on the issues of textile production, the economy, and also clothing in other themes. And the screen is frozen, so yeah. Give it a few minutes, a few seconds, hopefully. No? Yeah. I don't know what the presentation has frozen. Sorry. I can't even escape it. Solid. All right. Should we try to do it that way? Sometimes with the recording, it's a little bit, yeah. All right, let's do it that way. All right, so I just did a few slides to show you a little bit the different themes that I'm working about. One of them are fibers and the way they are integrated in the economy. So I worked quite a lot on cotton together with Magda, actually. And in Sudan, we're very fortunate because we have quite a lot of textile preserved, but also archaeobotanical remains, and cotton archaeobotanical remains are showing more and more on the archaeological sites. So that's something we can cross-reference throughout different type of sources, and it's quite interesting to see. And at the moment, I am also developing new research on animal fibers. So I put here a few snapshots of the animals that I am focusing on. Obviously sheep, goat, sometimes goat hair, but my research at the moment is trying to find a way to determine the presence of camel, and in that case dromedaries, of course, wool from sheep wool, because it's not always very clear with conservation, etc. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. Then I also work on tools and the organization of production. So we can find quite a lot of spindle wheels for Meroitic Sudan, generally in ceramic, but also sometimes in turned wood. And also these clay loom weights from the warp weighted loom. And what I try to do when I work in partnership with different excavations, but also from archive, is to replace the tools in the context of, well, first discovery, but ideally of use in the urban landscape. And another aspect of my research is to focus on textiles in funerary contexts. And that this is an example of several textiles that I studied several years ago from a tomb in Meroe in central Sudan, which were used, they were not found around the skeleton itself. As you can see, it's not very well preserved, but they were found in connection with the offerings, with all the materials that was found around the body. So the jars were wrapped, but also all the deposits here of the offering altar were wrapped and covered with different layers of textiles. So I work on the textiles themselves, and I try to reconstruct the way the objects were wrapped, but also very much on what it meant to wrap these objects in funerary rituals. And another theme, which is maybe more interesting for the working group here in EuroWeb, is garment production and dress practices that are associated to those garments. And I tried as much as the sources allow to compare iconography and textiles. We don't have much textual sources for the Meroitic Kingdom. First of all, because the script that you can see here is not completely deciphered yet, but also because they were not very prolix about sort of economic themes and all that in their writings. So there is not more on textiles as far as we can see now, but the iconography and the textiles are both two very rich corpus of documentation. So you can see here an example of this sort of a belt or a sash that was noted around the navel of male individuals. And in both cases, we see some sort of fringes and little bubble here, and it appears here on that one as well. And that an example, something that we can compare it with, it's from the same site, and it's a fragment of a sash also with very long fringes and this sort of typical open work border. And here's another example of a funerary stela, still from the same site. It's a site in Nubia called Karanog. And this lady is dressed with a wrapped around skirt, which has a very large pattern here, swastika. And again, we found fringes and bubbles similar to this border at the bottom. And here I put sort of textile that we can compare it with, or that we can find inspiration to imagine how it used to look like. It's a cotton textile from a nearby site, and it has, we can find the same pattern of this large swastika here in blue tapestry. And that's very typical of them both, of the Meroitic production from a very sort of elite context. And so I try to weave all of these different themes and sources and the project that I have been building and I'm continuing to build at CTR and later are quite interdisciplinary in nature, or at least I try to. That's an example of a piece. It's a loincloth from an early medieval context, still in Nubia. As you can see, it's quite damaged, but we can still sort of reconstruct the triangular shape. And it was found in situ, worn by a male individual. And so for this piece, for example, and it's soon to be published in the next ATR, so I thought it was going to be a good example for today. I did, of course, all the textile analysis in the museum where it is kept, which is the American Natural History Museum, sorry, in New York. So of course, all the technique and all that. We tried to do fiber identification, and on macroscopic views, it was not possible to firmly identify it as camel, but it's a very high suspicion. And so now that piece prompted me to start partnering with people in Copenhagen at the Globe Institute to start doing proteomics, proteomic analysis on wool to identify sheep from camel wool. So I hope we'll have more results about that soon, and that it will keep coming. The idea is also very much to try to develop datation from this material, because I work in a period where it's very blurry, the dating frame. And there is not much difference as far as we can see from textile itself to recognize these late antique, early medieval pieces. So this one was dated sometimes in 7th century, 8th or 9th, but probably the early bracket. And of course, because the body was found in situ in a well-preserved grave, it's dressed. All the questions linked to identity and social status can also be explored. So this is how I try to organize all of these different sources and analysis. In that case, it's quite interesting because we can show the development maybe of camel husbandry, desert network, the diversity of dress practices and burial treatment, because this is quite rare actually, this type of animation for the site. And then all the idea linked to sartorial display, the conformity to the new Christian customs, etc. So yeah, this is how I'm trying to work. You can know more about my work, of course, in academia. The Marie Curie project also has a blog, the Textiles blog, and I'm also currently developing a website, which is kind of an online archive of all the material found in one Nubian grave, late antique grave. And it was quite full of textiles, so there is all kinds of information about that, and I'm putting some more as well. The ongoing work at the moment, because I finished my Marie Curie now, very soon in April, I will be starting a new project at the University of Warsaw at the Polish Center for Mediterranean Archaeology with Magda. And it's called Unraveling Nubian Funerary Practices. And basically it's all about textiles in funerary context, and very much about wrapping bodies, etc. So this is the first thing. I'm also currently developing the Text Lab at CTR, which is an interdisciplinary hub for the study of ancient cloth cultures, where we're trying to do a working team of people working in natural sciences and people who are working on textile research, and how we can merge the two approaches. I'm also developing the Textile Archaeology in Egypt and Sudan Research Network, and I've started collaborating with several excavation missions in both Egypt and Sudan. So as you can see, my expertise is pretty much outside of the European sphere of EuroWeb per se. And for that reason, I'm very much interested in methodological aspects in textile research, and I'm collaborating with the working group 1 in that aspect. We'll be doing, with Magda again, a workshop on funerary textile in archaeology in April, to which you're very much invited to attend. And then we are working also on a concept of a summer school for August in textile archaeology and natural sciences with Christina Margretti and Eva Anderson-Strand. But for this working group specifically, I'm very much interested in the mechanisms that relate clothing to identity formation and expression. So all the theoretical approaches in archaeology, social anthropology, ethnology, etc. But also clothing and iconography, of course. And maybe we can work also, I had some ideas about the European collections of African clothing items and how we can use ethnology and costume to approach the mechanism, the construction of others. And I guess that will be all for me.